Hello everyone, welcome to Diplomatic Briefing. On the night of September 19th, President Xi Jinping of China had a phone call with US President Donald Trump. They had a frank and in-depth exchange of views on current China-US relations and issues of mutual concern, and provided strategic guidance for the stable development of China-US relations in the next stage. According to Xinhua news agency, the call was pragmatic, positive, and constructive. The report said President Xi pointed out that China and the US were allies fighting side by side during World War II. Not long ago, China held a grand event to commemorate the 80th anniversary of the victory of the Chinese People's War of Resistance against Japanese aggression in the World Anti-Fascist War, and invited descendants of the American Flying Tigers to the Tiananmen rostrum to watch the military parade. The Chinese people will not forget the valuable support provided by the US and other anti-fascist allies to China's war effort. He said, "We should cherish peace and create the future on the basis of remembering our forebears and keeping history in mind." President Xi also emphasized that China-US relations are extremely important. China and the US can absolutely achieve mutual success and shared prosperity, benefiting both countries and the world. To realize this vision, both sides need to move towards each other and make efforts to achieve mutual respect, peaceful coexistence, and win-win cooperation. The recent initial interactions between the two teams have reflected the spirit of equality, respect, and reciprocity, and can continue to properly handle prominent issues in the bilateral relationship, striving for mutually beneficial outcomes. The US side should avoid taking unilateral trade restriction measures to prevent conflicts. The two sides have achieved results through multiple rounds of consultations. China's position on the TikTok issue is clear. The Chinese government respects the wishes of enterprises and is happy to see them conduct commercial negotiations based on market rules and reach solutions that balance interests in accordance with Chinese laws and regulations. It hopes that the United States will provide an open, fair, and non-discriminatory business environment for Chinese companies to invest in the United States. Xinhua news agency quoted Trump as saying in the call that China's military parade commemorating the 80th anniversary of the victory of the War of Resistance against Japanese aggression was very exciting. The US-China relationship is the most important bilateral relationship in the world. Cooperation between the two countries can create many major events that are conducive to world peace and stability. The US side, the United States, hopes to maintain a long-term, good, and great relationship with China. The United States hopes to promote economic and trade cooperation between the two countries and will support the two sides' team consultations to properly resolve the TikTok issue. The United States is willing to work with China to maintain world peace. Since September, high-level Chinese and American leaders have started a round of intensive interaction. Sino-US relations have gone from high-intensity confrontation to a slight easing now. This roadmap has also been the same since Biden took office. In the second half of the year, various multilateral summits will be held. Whether the leaders of China and the United States will reflect on global concerns, with each having their own considerations, they both hope that the Chinese and American heads of state can meet at these summits and at the same time, through such actions, they can convey their views to the whole world that China and the United States have no intention of or are not moving toward direct confrontation. Dean of the Institute of International Studies at Fudan University, Director Wu of the American Studies Center. However, Sun Bo believes that within the Trump administration, there were different voices and ideas regarding the direction of Asia-Pacific policy. Some of these views advocated for reducing US involvement in Europe and the Middle East, shifting the focus to the Asia-Pacific, and treating China as the main rival. This was what Biden wanted to do at the time. Another perspective argued that the US should further scale back, including moderately withdrawing from the Asia-Pacific, and concentrate resources and attention on the Americas and the United States itself. Sun Bo believes that in the field of economy and trade, regardless of how the US Asia-Pacific strategy develops, the economic and trade relationship with China has always been a personal focus for Trump. On this issue, he might have two approaches. One is to resolve economic and trade issues through negotiations while maintaining an overall good relationship with China. This is a win-win approach. The other possibility is that, on one hand, he increases military pressure on China in the South China Sea and the Taiwan Strait, while on the other hand, he makes very high demands on China in economic and trade matters, expecting China to make concessions. In reality, this is impossible to achieve, because the economic and security fields will create a kind of tension that is inherently contradictory. He pointed out that over the past 6 months or so, Trump has actually gone through a learning process regarding China. At first, he adopted a coercive tariff war strategy against China, fighting very aggressively, thinking he could force China to make concessions. Later, he realized He realized that this path was blocked as China fought back, causing the US to suffer. As a result, he shifted to seeking reconciliation and entered negotiations with China, moving into a transactional phase. This shift from coercion to negotiation is a significant change, because making deals requires both sides to make mutual concessions, that is, give and take. However, US policy toward Taiwan has enormous inertia. For a long time, the US has played the Taiwan card against China, using the Taiwan issue as an important lever in its China strategy, Asia-Pacific strategy, or Indo-Pacific strategy. Therefore, the US will not easily give up this card. Still, the pressure China has put on Trump is considerable. On September 18, the Washington Post cited 5 sources saying that, in order to promote a trade agreement with China, President Trump refused to approve more than $400 million in military aid to Taiwan this summer. According to the sources, although Trump could still change his mind, this decision marks a significant shift in US policy toward Taiwan. 2 sources said that this military aid package, worth over $400 million, would be more lethal than previous rounds of aid to Taiwan, including ammunition and autonomous drones. A White House official said in a statement that a final decision on this aid package had not yet been made, and the Taipei Economic and Cultural Representative Office in the US also declined to comment. 4 people familiar with the situation revealed that last month, both sides agreed on a large-scale arms sales plan. Taiwan plans to approve a supplemental defense budget to pay for this new round of arms purchases, with the total amount possibly reaching several billion dollars. The report said that in order to reach an agreement with China, the Trump administration has recently taken a softer stance on issues like semiconductor exports and TikTok, but this has raised concerns among some former Trump administration members and Republican lawmakers. Former Pentagon official and current American Enterprise Institute member Blumenthal added fuel to the fire, saying that this is precisely the time when the U.S. cannot afford to let its guard down. The report stated that the Presidential Drawdown Authority, PDA, is the fastest way for the U.S. to provide military aid to Taiwan. During the Biden administration, 3 batches of PDA aid to Taiwan were approved, along with another round of long-term military assistance, totaling over $2 billion. However, Trump pursues a transactional foreign policy, advocating that aid recipients should purchase American weapons themselves. This approach is reflected not only in the policy toward Ukraine but also applies to the Taiwan region. Trump believes that Taiwan should, like Europe, procure its own defense equipment. To sum up simply, first, there are currently no signs that the U.S. strategy of containing China will change. However, whether this pressure is effective, Since the start of Trump's first term, it's been nearly 10 years, and clearly things haven't gone as smoothly as American politicians expected. Different presidents have different styles. As for Trump's second term, it's not that his China policy has changed, but rather, what more can the U.S. do to contain China? Every possible approach has proven that the U.S. is already out of options. Second, Trump rejected the approval of $400 million in arms sales to Taiwan. On one hand, he genuinely doesn't want these arms deals to get in the way of economic and trade negotiations with China. On the other hand, what Trump really wants is for Taiwan to understand that there's no such thing as a free lunch. The fact that Taiwanese politicians are willing to send both money and TSMC to the U.S. actually shows their lack of foresight. Third, foreign media reports, citing sources, say that although Trump could still change his mind, this decision marks a significant shift in U.S. policy toward Taiwan. This claim is just the U.S. side floating rumors, making things up out of thin air for their own purposes. They fabricate some bargaining chips today, for the sake of negotiations. They say they won't approve it, and the next day they tell you they're forced by domestic circumstances to approve it. So the Chinese side simply doesn't buy into this game played by American politicians and will only act according to its own pace. Of course, when the U.S. side crosses China's bottom line, China will use its strength to issue a warning. Take Trump as an example. His show of force in March and September was meant to send a clear message to American politicians. On the other hand, Trump and other American politicians want to decouple from China, but the more they try, the more they realize how difficult it is. This year's U.S.-China trade war has made it clear that the U.S. simply can't do without China economically and in trade. For instance, if China stops exporting rare earths to the U.S., many critical American supply chains would be cut off. If China stops buying American soybeans, U.S. agriculture would face a crisis. In previous years, on September 1st, American farmers would be all smiles as they headed to the fields to harvest soybeans, because that's when Chinese buyers would start placing orders. But now, even though American soybeans are ready for harvest, buyers from China are no longer placing orders and have turned to Brazil and other South American countries instead. The American Soybean Association, Previously, it was said that Chinese buyers refused to place orders because of the price. Due to the tariff war, American soybeans are 20% more expensive than South American soybeans. Facing the prospect of American farmers losing everything, two major Republican leaders from Iowa are getting anxious. Iowa is a traditional agricultural state in the U.S. According to local media, the Des Moines Register, on local time. On September 17, U.S. Senator Chuck Grassley and Iowa Secretary of Agriculture Mike Naig expressed their views to the business community, stating that they are urging the Trump administration to reach a trade agreement with China as soon as possible, in hopes of bringing the world's largest soybean buyer back to the U.S. soybean market. The cabinet told reporters that the disappearance of Chinese buyers has led to a sharp drop in both the price and profit of American soybeans. The cabinet said, besides the drop in prices, the cost for American farmers to grow crops remains persistently high. He bluntly said, "This is really 1,000 cuts for our farmers. We need China to come to the negotiating table and reach a trade agreement with the United States." The Des Moines Chronicle reported that China is typically the largest buyer of U.S. soybeans, importing $13.2 billion last year. As the second largest soybean producer in the U.S. after Illinois, Canada would be hit hard if it loses Chinese buyers. Several Republican lawmakers from farm states have also urged the Trump administration to release economic aid to farmers as soon as possible before the end of the year. U.S. Agriculture Secretary John Rawlings said on the 15th that he is working with Congress every day to assess the impact of this fall's economic downturn. On the 17th, Rawlings told the Financial Times that they would soon announce a package of aid to the agricultural sector through tariff revenue flowing into the United States. It is definitely possible, but Rawlings could not give a clear timetable or specific amount for the aid plan. However, the government can only save this year, and there are still days to go. The Institute for Food and Agricultural Policy at the University of Missouri in the United States estimates that due to the reduction of government subsidies and the decline of crops, low prices could cause U.S. farms to see their net income drop by more than $300 by 2026. The Cato Institute, a U.S. think tank, says trade issues are the root cause. Trump's tariffs and the resulting confrontation have caused overseas buyers to abandon purchases of U.S. agricultural products. This means that farmers who rely on exports will see a reduction in their overseas sales. Because there are a large number of crops being sold on consignment, domestic prices have also fallen. The most noteworthy thing here is China's role in Trump's first round. During Trump's presidency, China has been avoiding U.S. soybeans due to the trade war he launched. This trend has accelerated since Trump returned to the White House, and it will be a devastating blow to American farmers. Think tanks say that American farmers' trade problems are not just about soybean exports. Since Trump once again imposed arbitrary tariffs this year, other U.S. agricultural product exporters, including beef, pork, almonds, dairy products, cotton, sorghum, and other products, have also been hit. Apart from China, other significant countries are also increasingly distancing themselves from U.S. agriculture. And LT, break time equals 0.5s/NGT. In May of this year, the U.S. Department of Agriculture officially predicted that due to the imposition of tariffs and ongoing, persistent trade tensions, agricultural exports would regrettably continue to weaken, and the overall agricultural trade deficit could potentially further widen significantly.